What's the difference between a scope, a prism optic, and a red dot? TLDR, if you want to shoot a long ways, get a scope. If you want to shoot in the middle, get a prism. If you want to shoot up close, get a red dot. But let's be honest, you all probably knew that, so let's talk about the differences a little bit more. Right here, down on the bottom, I've got a Primary Arms ACSS scope. This is their marksman or designated marksman rifle optic with a reticle that is built specifically for 308. This is the POF 308 Rogue, which I absolutely love. Fabulous gun. But the idea of the scope is you can engage targets out to longer distances, and it has built-in holdovers because obviously as you shoot further distances, your projectile is going to drop. So scopes are typically a little bit more complicated. You can see this one has larger knobs for adjusting your impact if you're compensating for wind or drop, all that kind of stuff. So that's your scope. This also has, you can adjust the magnification. So it has variable magnification. This one goes all the way from 5x, or apologies, 4x, and you can crank it all the way up to 14x. So it gives you a lot of adjustability there. With 14x, you know, they say you should have 1x magnification for every 100 yards. So in theory, you could shoot 1400 yards, but if you're shooting 1400 yards, you probably have a much more expensive and higher magnification optic than this one. But even so, I love this optic. It has served me well. This next one, this is a prism optic. Now, prism optics are typically magnified, or they are magnified, but they typically have a fixed point. So this one is fixed at 4x magnification. So whereas this one can change from 4x to 14x, this one is stuck at 4 all the time. I typically prefer these on more mid-range weapons. I also like to have them on air guns just because it's convenient. This one in particular is from Pinty. Let's see if I can get our reticle to show up here. There you go. Probably just looks like a dot, but it's just a little tiny triangle, a chevron, so to speak. So it's very durable, very robust, very simple system. There's not a whole lot to go wrong. It does not have easily adjustable turrets like our scope from Primary Arms does, where it just has the click turrets. Instead, you have to remove them and then make your adjustments there with, you know, a nickel or pocket knife or screwdriver or whatever you've got on hand. Who carries nickels anymore? So this is meant to be set once and then left alone. You don't touch it. You would just, you know, take a guess at where the bullet should land if there is really serious wind conditions or anything like that. So much simpler optic, meant for much shorter ranges and not for doing mental math. I would consider this more of a combat accurate optic where you don't really care about getting a really small group. You just care about hitting a, you know, a man-sized target at a distance. Other than that, you don't really care. Whereas this, you know, obviously good for that kind of stuff too, but if you want to be a lot more precise, putting shots through windows, putting shots into small squares on pieces of paper a long ways away, you know, you want a little bit more magnification. And then we have one of my personal favorite red dots. This is the Holosun 509T. This thing is great. I've run it on a lot of different guns. Let's see if we can pick up our dot here. There we go. I can see it at least. It's in there, I promise. There we go. So because optics don't show up well on camera, you can't see what the reticle looks like. But it's a, there we go, a little bit. It's a donut of death is what I call it, where you have an outer circle and then you have an inner dot. I personally really like this, especially when mounted on a shotgun or a handgun, because if you need to just take a quick shot, you can just put that whole circle right over your target and take your shot. It's going to land in there. But if you need to take your time, shoot something more at distance, you have that little dot on the inside that you can focus on. So I much prefer this for applications where I care about speed. So your 3-gun competitions, your pistol shooting, shotgun shooting, especially if you're running buckshot or birdshot, it's just a fabulous optic. This one does have shake awake, as I like all of my red dots to have. It does have the solar backup. The only thing that I don't like about this particular one is it uses the solar backup for the auto brightness feature, which is great. It makes sense. You know, you have a sensor there, why not use it? But the problem is of course the solar panel is on top. And if you ever run a flashlight, the light source is coming from the front. And so if you take this into a dark room and you turn on a light, it's not going to auto adjust. So with these, I typically will just turn off the auto brightness and just keep them close to the brightest setting. So it's not so bright that it gets washed out in a dark room with a light, but it's not so dim that it gets washed out in the daylight. So there you go. You've got your red dot with 0 magnification, your prism with a fixed magnification, typically anywhere from 3 to 5x, and then your scope with a higher power level of magnification, typically variable. Then of course you have first focal plane, second focal plane. But there's the difference between a scope, a prism, and a red dot.